Welcome to Between Sundays. I'm Tyler, and I don't need a bunch of rules to live by. My life is Christ. Today, we're getting rid of all the sweaty and gross and clothing ourselves with love. We're talking about God's invitation to wives. But before we bind ourselves in perfect harmony and mutually submit to one another, let's welcome in our favorite transformed and transforming co-hosts, Barry and Amy.
Wow. Transformed and transforming.
I know. We're still in process. That's right.
No Marin today, so Amy's here.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a new one. I like it.
Is that from yesterday? Really? I did that yesterday?
Ooh.
Oh, no. That was not during my sermon, though. That was somewhere else in the service. I don't think
That was in your sermon.
Oh, great. I don't even remember. I was in a fog a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm a co-host today.
Today, you're co-hosting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm
Marin had
stepping
a
up.
extended family crisis come up,
Yes.
and so she had to head
Head
out.
to Chicago.
So,
Yeah.
literally moments ago.
Yeah, just
so.
before we started recording, she had to head out. But this, you can consider this like a trial run for when she's on sabbatical.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's coming up soon.
It
Yeah.
is June through August.
Good for
Yeah.
her. I can't wait for her to have that time. It's
Yeah.
gonna be good.
Guys, it's been a couple weeks since we've done a podcast for different reasons. 1 week, Barry was sick, and Marin, something happened. I don't know. Last week, we were doing what we call Factory Week, where we kind of shut down the quote unquote factory so we can work on the factory and better equip our staff for ministry the rest of the year. So it's been 2 weeks since we've done a show, but we're back. So what's new? What's going on?
I would think the friends will be very excited to have you back.
Yeah, friends of the pod. I'm glad you're back when you show up to church or something and people are giving you a hard time about not.
Why wasn't there an episode this week?
Did I miss something? Is the feed down or something?
Is my app working?
Did it drop late? Is that what you say?
That's what the kids are saying. That,
okay.
Yeah, the new pod just dropped.
Yeah, very late.
Is that what they say? No. What did they say? Did it dropped?
Pod drop?
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay.
New episode?
Sure. I guess it can just be that simple.
I don't know.
I'm a sweaty mess.
I knew. I knew when I put it. I knew it. I knew these were going to be the bites. I knew it.
You knew that?
The little sound bites. Yeah, I knew when I talked about the sweaty clothes, but it just was a real good picture for me. But I knew you were going to pick it. I knew you were going to pick it apart.
There's nothing you can do.
No.
You're just stuck with that.
I'm
It's
stuck.
going to happen.
Yep.
What's new? What's going on?
New?
It's May.
It is May. Somehow.
May.
It's
in
almost
Indiana.
the end of May.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's what feels. May was a day. May
Yeah.
feels like it was a day.
Yeah.
Barry, you got tons done during Factory Week. I know that.
Well, yeah. I spent like a million years in this room, it felt like, on that 1 week. I'm friends of the pod. I'm recording a virtual course, or like an online course version of my Bible class for Bible skeptics. And so
You don't think I'm impressive?
you're going
You're
to
going
after you
to.
see the 6.5 hours of content that I recorded.
Get ready, everybody.
It's
6
a
hours
marathon.
binge watching.
It won't actually be that long. That's just how much raw footage I got. But
Binge worthy.
yeah, I'm doing like this online course style. So there's like 22 different videos and 4 different sections, and there'll be kind of like assignments and reflection questions and stuff. So hopefully it'll be the kind of thing that's engaging for people at Grace and beyond.
And that was your skeptics?
Yes,
Is that
Bible
okay.
skeptics class.
Will
So
you
kind of
do that for every class that you do you
well,
think?
we'll see if all of that labor leads to like good outcomes and a lot of people are engaging with it, then yeah. But it's just the whole class. In case you don't know about the skeptics class, it's all about dealing with just the really hard questions about the Bible. Like, what do you do if you feel like the Bible's a little bit old-fashioned or barbaric? What do you do if it feels like the Bible is irrelevant? What do you do if the Bible is wrong? Those kinds of things. That we just address those questions head on, not in an apologetic standpoint, but like how do we move through our faith, through our skepticism into a place of faith. And so I don't know. The class, I've done the class twice and had some good feedback both times. And so I thought, let's take the content on the road.
And you're doing this primarily, like nobody's asking you to do this. This is like
Nobody's asking for this.
This is like your passion. Like you're excited about the person who you just described, somebody who may be a little bit more skeptical about faith.
I'm specifically passionate about people who maybe they've done the deconstruction of their faith. They've kind of ripped their faith down to the studs, but they don't want to give it up. They don't want to walk away from Christ. They just don't know how do I move forward since all these big questions don't seem to have satisfactory answers. And I'm a skeptic too. And so my whole passion is how do I help people with their faith reconstruction by sharing some of my own journey of faith. And so that's kind of what the whole thing is. And so, yeah, if it's successful, I'll start doing other classes, like maybe my Revelation class I could do as an online course and things like that. That's coming up.
Starts this week.
This Wednesday, today,
Yeah.
if you're listening to the pod on the day that it drops.
It's dropping the day of your class.
I think so. Yeah. So it's 4 weeks on the Book of Revelation. I'm excited about that. I've been kind of going nonstop because I've been doing the skeptic stuff. I've been getting ready for the Revelation class. My garden, it's spring, and so you're just constantly planting things and weeding and doing things. I will say, I was hoping you'd ask how I was doing because because right before I came to church today, I had gummy berries from my garden for the first time.
This is a family-friendly show.
And they are actually really great. I've been waiting for years to find out what
is a gummy berry?
Well, I didn't even know.
How do you spell gummy?
Goumi.
Okay.
They're these little, they're kind of, think of like a smallish little sour cherry that's like kind of sweet, but it has kind of an astringent, it like sucks all the moisture out of your mouth. Kind of weird. But they taste really good.
You just eat it like a snack?
Or yeah. Or you can like,
do you put it?
You can make jams and stuff out of it. Yeah. But they're all over my gummy berry plant this year. So,
nice.
But this year's going to be insane because now I've got tons of strawberries already.
Yes, you brought us some. Thank you.
I do. Yeah, there's some strawberries here. I've got some more strawberries coming later after these guys are finished. And then I've got raspberries. I've got blackberries. I've got apples, pears. I have the gummy berries, the gooseberries. I'll have hardy kiwis. I think I'll have grapes this year. It's like, it's happening. It's actually happening.
So that's a lot of fruit.
We started talking about this like 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, yeah, they were all just little twigs I was sticking in the ground.
What's going on with the vegetable side of things?
Lots there as well.
You have some spaghetti squash coming?
Nope. I'm doing, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's this, have you seen those like more like decorative pumpkins that are kind of grayish on the outside, kind of silvery gray, kind of more disc-like.
Yeah.
Those, I'm growing a bunch of those because we always get a ton of cast-off pumpkins after Halloween to give to the pigs.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've been getting used to all the different varieties, that one has like a really dark, like really sweet smelling inside. The pigs love it. And so I'm going to grow it for the pigs and for us to eat because I'm tired of just regular old jack-o'-lantern pumpkins.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
They're boring.
Orange is boring.
That's right.
Orange is boring.
So lots of stuff like that. I'm growing flour corn this year to actually make like my own tortillas and stuff.
Oh, that's fun.
Okay, so it's all happening now.
Yeah.
Aren't you worried that it's going to like rot? Can you eat it fast enough? All the stuff's coming in.
Well, the thing is
when it's that fresh, it probably...
well, that's why I'm bringing you guys stuff so it doesn't rot. But no, the fruit, I don't have enough of it to have like a glut. I mean, I'll have like 12 apples. It's not gonna be like truckloads, you know. And I have one berry bush that I can every time I go out to my garden, I can eat a handful of gummy berries and you know the raspberries. But it's
so
not
you're
like
not taking it to the farmer's
no,
market.
I'm not doing like massive harvest. I would need a lot more plants to do that.
Okay,
so it's more just kind of for fun. It's hobby,
and for sustenance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, what about you guys? How are you doing?
Yeah. What's new with you, Amy?
I don't know. I feel like into the school year. So Maggie's finishing up her junior year at Carmel, and Annie just got home today from Miami of Ohio from her junior year in college. So she's home. So it feels
for the
like
summer. The whole she's done already.
Yeah,
huh?
she's done.
All right. So all the kids are home.
All the kids are home because we've got 2 older ones that live with us as well. So it's my quiver is full.
Yeah, full house.
So
Proverbs.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of people, and it's good. But Maggie's having a great, it's just fun to finish out the year with her and look forward to what senior year is going to be like. She just got a part, and there's a fringe festival, a theater festival that happens in downtown Indy every August, and it's like a 10-day theater festival where they do little shows. And so the drama class from Carmel always takes a show to Fringe. And Maggie got one of the lead parts in it. So we're so excited about that. And
nice.
So grad party this weekend for one of her friends. We had the end of year show choir family party. I was part of a skit for that. So that was fun.
Yeah, that dreams come true.
I know, dreams do come true. They were all like, we didn't know you were a professional. And I was
Did they get their giant leaves?
Oh, yeah, I know. I mistakenly put, I have too many group me's going on. And so I was asking if they needed giant leaves. And I mistakenly put it
it's
in
like we talked about Josh Traumenhauser, I don't know, a month ago or so. And there's an ongoing chat with like 80 people.
Yeah,
it's just like updates and like
Just
serious updates on how Josh and Nicole.
updates.
Yeah, what do we need?
And that kind
What's
of
going on?
Lots of prayer stuff. And so I put in there.
Out of nowhere.
Would these big leaves work for our skit? I'll bring them tonight. And people were like, what? Yeah.
Wrong chat.
We didn't use the leaves.
Okay.
I didn't even need to put that in the chat.
Bummer.
So yeah, that's my life right now.
Okay.
What
Any
about
big
you?
summer plans?
Annie's turning 21 this summer, so we'll probably do something fun for her birthday. But I don't think we're going to travel much. Our kids, the two older ones are working, like they're out in the working world.
Yeah.
And then Annie needs to save money over the summer for next year. Like she wants to work a lot. And then Maggie's going to work and do Grace Kids Camp and do a camp at the high school and show choir camp and go on the indie trip. So it feels like we're too busy.
Already spoken for.
And school starts like August 6th. For everyone. It's so early. There's hardly time to fit in a trip. So I don't know. If we do something, it'll be small.
Okay.
So next year, maybe when both of them graduate from college and high school respectively, we will take a big family trip or something. I don't know. I don't know. What about you? Did you go to the track yesterday?
No, I did not go to the track.
Your family did.
My family went without me. Since we last spoke, I spent 5 days without Lauren.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
she was in the Dominican Republic with our entire support system.
Right. A 40th birthday party.
Yeah.
Your sister's
my sister's
40th.
turned 40. And so my sisters, Lauren's sisters, my mom, anybody
but not Lauren's mom.
Not Lauren's mom.
Which she was very helpful.
Yeah, it was game changer.
Yeah.
They all left for 5 days. And I had our 3 kids for that time. And I would say I was at my limit. Like, I think we did fine. I think we did good.
You survived.
We survived. It was like mac and cheese every night or like
right.
something super.
Chicken nuggets.
Yeah, chicken nuggets, chicken fries.
How many times did you go through a drive-through for food, or did you actually?
Well, Lauren tried to set us up with food before she left.
Okay.
So she's like, here's the meals for each day. And
wow,
you could probably
she's really nice.
She's like, you could probably go out once. I was like, fat chance. We're going out like 3 or 4 times. So we hit Chick-fil-A a couple times.
Yeah.
But overall, it was good. There were a couple instances that made me want to pull my hair out. Like the baby was the least of the problems.
She's a perfect child.
She really is just so cute and easy.
One day, I walk out to take our trash out through the garage, and I walk out into a garage where Lane is standing in the middle of it, and he's peeing on the floor of the garage. We have multiple bathrooms in our house.
Right.
And he's chosen to just pee on the floor inside the garage.
Yeah.
So that was an issue. Another issue is
boys.
We have an alarm system in our house. So anytime you open a door or a window
or pee in the garage.
Yeah, it kind of goes doo-doo, to let us know somebody's.
We have that too.
So I was watching basketball at like 11:30 one night. And I heard that happen. I heard doo-doo. And I was like, oh no. Like I'm going to have to get in a fight.
Right.
Somebody's breaking into our house.
Did you get out a baseball bat? Are you ready?
No,
to
so
go?
I like peek around the corner and I just see Milo like just standing like stick straight next to the back door with the back door wide open. I'm like, Milo.
Was he sleepwalking?
I was like, what are you doing? And he goes, I need to find the tubes. I'm like, what? Are you sleepwalking? And he's like, no. But I need to find those tubes for me and Lane. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. I think you're sleepwalking, buddy. Let's go back to bed. And he's like, I need a drink and it's out there. And so it occurred to me that like we have to batten down the hatches now because we have a sleepwalker.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's such a thing as sleep eating too, where people go out and just
they destroy the fridge, right?
Gorge themselves with food.
Whoa.
I hope he doesn't move. I hope he doesn't move into that.
Yeah. Thank you. Me too.
I can combine both of those stories for when I was little. I, at one point, would sleepwalk all the time. And I, at one point, walked into my parents' bedroom and started peeing into their trash can in the bedroom. So maybe you have that to look forward to as well.
One night I walked in, I heard Lane start screaming in the middle of the night, and I walked in, and you know how like bunk beds have those slats that go across the frame or whatever to hold the mattress? So he's in the top bunk, and he has, I don't know how he did it, but he has put his legs
through the
through
slats,
the slats
and he couldn't get him out.
all the way
Yep.
to his like midsection, and he couldn't, like half of his body was hanging down below, and half
Where
and
Milo's sleeping.
Yeah, where Milo's
Yeah.
sleeping, and the other half was above, and he was just stuck. He couldn't get himself stuck. So those are the only 3 instances. Way better than past times Lauren's left, but
You need to write all this down.
why?
I'm not joking, because you're going to want to remember all of these things as they get older, and you will trust me.
He can go back and listen to the podcast. I'm
That's
sure.
true. I guess you can. But someone told me
Write
that
it all
one time
down?
to write it all down. So it's the funny things. Just you don't want to forget, like that. It's just funny.
Yeah,
and
it was. I'll never forget the time Lauren left and Milo puked into our
into
HVAC.
the, yeah.
I don't think
I
I
got
need.
it.
I
I forgot about that one.
don't think I need
But
to write
I mean,
that one
like
down.
little things they say and stuff, like
Yeah.
that moment
Yeah.
with
Yeah,
Milo
yeah,
where
yeah.
he's like, "Where are the tubes?"
Yeah,
You're gonna
I need
forget
to
that
find the
someday.
tubes.
Yeah, you're gonna forget that someday.
Yeah.
And hey, I think peeing in the garage way better than peeing in your bed. Like
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
that's the worst. You don't have to clean it up, and
Yeah.
that's all you had to do was hose it down. You're done. That's easy. That's way
True.
easy.
That's true. Yes,
Plus
but it's good she's back.
Yes, it is good.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
back. She's the light. She's a light. she's a joy. She's
Yeah.
just full of joy. I love when I see her. She's very joyful.
There was she FaceTimed us once, and it was just me and Lou, the baby, and turned the camera around to Lou, and Lou just kind of like does this. She like holds out
Aw.
her arms
Yes.
to the phone, and Lauren got sad about
I'm
that.
sure
yeah.
she did. Yeah.
But-
Lou's very cute. Very cute. I do have to ask you, are you not so excited that the Pacers won?
Yeah, Pacers, big time.
I know. It's
Very,
so
you
fun.
know.
Big time fan.
Sports ball.
So
Pacers
proud.
made it to the
So
Eastern
proud of
Conference
them.
Finals for the first time in 10 years.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean they're going to probably get destroyed by Boston, but hey, it's
Yeah.
still
Yeah,
fun.
it's still fun.
Still fun. And who
Yeah.
thought they'd get this far? I just think it's super
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Will got to go to the game on Friday.
Knicks game?
Yeah, he went to the game at the
You know,
Cambridge.
yeah.
Cambridge, and he sat right behind Halliburton's dad. Got to
Really?
high five him, and yeah, it was real cool.
All right.
Very fun for him.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, sure.
Starts tomorrow night. All right. We are in week 4.
Good luck.
5?
Yeah.
Husbands,
Yep.
elders,
Yep.
Parents,
kids,
children, wives.
wives. All right. So
And
we're in
next
week
is
5
last week.
of our sermon series, Family Ties.
Hey, all in the family.
All
All
in
in the-
family.
Family matters.
Growing pains.
Growing pains.
family.
Full house.
All in the family. And Amy, you gave the message this
Yes.
past weekend. So tell us, what is God's invitation to wives?
Well, my big idea kind of turned out to be if more than just being
Anger is
called
my go-to.
anger. Oh, it is.
Anger is my go-to.
Gosh, you got all the good stuff off of me this weekend. I really gave you a lot to play with. Just that our call to be a good wife is really just our call to be good women, like to be women of God and disciples of Jesus and image bearers of God. And so that was really more of my call is in order to be a good wife, I have to be the kind of woman that God's called me to be. So
Yeah.
that was really the big idea.
Yeah, and I'm glad you just touched on image bearers, because my first question was going to be, we've touched on this a couple times in this series, like we are called to be image bearers. That's what God is calling all of us to be. And so I'd like to just take a moment to break that down, like for someone who may be new to the faith or someone who's like hearing these sermons for the first time or these concepts for the first time. What does being an image bearer of Christ or being an image bearer of God actually mean?
Well, some of what, and Barry, feel free to jump in wherever
Go
you want.
ahead. Yeah.
But a lot of that piece of it came from our theology cohort when we were talking about the whole idea of sin and sin entering the world, and that part of what we're doing and is restoring the image of who
Yeah.
God is to the rest of the world. And that was, I loved that image, and I added actually at 11 o'clock. I don't think I said it both hours. I was not feeling well yesterday, so
Mhm.
everything's a little foggy to me. But how if our marriages, if we were bearing the image of God in our marriages, Christian marriages, how that would so deeply restore the image of who God is to such a broken world. And
Yeah.
so I feel like Jesus was our example of how to be an image bearer of God. I feel like that's part of why he existed and came and lived on the earth as a human being, was to give us the manual for how do we do this, and then left us the Holy Spirit to be the guide to help us do that. Now that he's no longer here, he gave us that gift. So that idea of restoring the image of God, what a responsibility as a Christ follower to help restore that image.
Right. I think, Tyler, you said, that, God calls us to be image bearers. I think the only modification I would make to that is to say that we already are, or we were created to be that.
Yeah.
But sin disfigures that image in us. So we've talked before. I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast, but the whole concept of being the image bearer of God, it comes from Genesis, where it talks about God creating males and females, or humanity first, and then male and female in his image. And what that meant in the ancient world is, like, ancient kings would put up their image, like a statue of the king, in their far-flung regions to show, like, this is the one who rules over you. And so in a way, we are the representative statues of God in creation. So everywhere that we are, we're meant to be reflections of who God is, except we're not statues, we're living creatures, we're living beings. And so we should be, whenever you see a human, you should say, and that's what God is like. But of course, that's not the case.
That's not what happened.
No,
More
because
often than not.
of sin. And so sin has disfigured the image of God in us. So when we see humans, we see what was meant to be that has been completely taken off course. And so what Jesus did is he came in and showed us what an image bearer truly looks like. When you look at Christ, you actually are looking at God. And through him, we have the ability to restore or journey towards the restoration of that image bearing in each of us. And so that's what Christ does, by taking away the consequences of sin, by giving us the ability to be sanctified and transformed. So that's what that is all about. So
yeah. Okay, so
What he said.
yeah. Well, I think it's funny. I don't know if the camera actually picked this up, but I think it's funny that you took it while he was on camera talking. You took a drink, but you, like, leaned over to get out of your camera. But I think you
No. I got out to get away from the microphone while I coughed.
No, you picked up your drink and you're like,
Oh, I wasn't doing that.
I don't
on
know.
purpose.
I don't know if his camera picked you up. You, like, leaned into his camera. Anyways,
give the people what they want.
Now I'm going to do it on purpose.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to. I leaned over to cough because I didn't want to cough in the microphone.
All right. So as you're setting up the context, because you focused on Colossians primarily, you said that Paul is trying to call that audience to a higher way of living rather than just giving them a list of rules to follow. But then I noticed once we get to verse 5, he says things like, have nothing to do with sexual immorality or impurity or lust and evil desires. Don't lie to each other. To me, that sounds like a list of rules. So
I can see that.
Do you see these as rules, or are they kind of like sitting above? Because you said they're principles to live by, but do they kind of sit above like what we would think of when we think of religious laws or rules or something?
I feel like he was talking more about the rules of the very strict specific rules of, like, don't eat this, don't touch that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I feel like what he was saying were more ideas that, or ways of being, like, all of the sexual things that he talked about would be probably categorized under, like, lust, and then you had greed, and then you had how you use so it felt more to me. And then because the second part of it was live like this, tenderhearted mercy, and which are not rules, they're more ideas or characteristics of how you live. So it didn't feel like a list of rules to me. It felt like, that's.
Yeah. And to go along with the image you talked about, like the sweaty clothes, but you could also think of it as like filthy clothes.
Right.
Like the image of God is us who we're meant to be. And then all the sin that he's listing there, the sexual immorality, the impurity, the lust, the anger, the rage, that's like filth that's being like thrown on us or that we are smearing ourselves with to the point where you're unrecognizable. You have to take that off. You can't keep wearing all that filth. and put on new clothes to look like who you're supposed to be. So
Yeah.
So this message primarily, so we're trying to like share what God's invitation is to different roles within a family or church family.
Yeah.
This primarily was targeted towards wives, but I like, and you said this in the sermon, I like how there's a kind of an invitation for multiple types of people. Like if one of the main points is being the kind of wife you need to be is really just kind of being the woman you kind of need to be. Like you could say that for any of the roles that we're
Yeah,
talking about. But I really like how you kind of kept the main thing. Like the point isn't like, how do you be the best role? It is, how do you be the most submissive to Christ?
Right.
right.
So I really like that. Was this a sermon that you were looking forward to preaching? Because I remember when we were kind of talking about who's going to preach what, and we're like, Amy can preach about being a wife. You're like, oh yeah, just ask Jeff how great of a wife. Was this something that you were looking forward to, or was this something that was challenging?
The more I dug into it, I was because that idea of I'm not just talking about being a wife. I'm talking about being a Christ follower, a disciple of Jesus, and so that I will be a better version of me in all areas of my life if I am living like that and always considering that I'm an image bearer. And also, I do think I've learned some things along the way. I mean, we've been married for a long time, 31 years, and even that idea of it's not prescriptive. Like I can't stand up here and tell you how to be a good wife because it's different for every woman and it's different for every marriage. And that's why I started out by saying, when Jeff and I first got married and went to that class, we were like, well, this applies to us, but very differently than it applies
Sure.
to, and like in our home, some of the decisions are made by me and some are made by him because bring different gifts to our marriage. We have different passions. There are things that matter a lot to him. So I hope that I got to the place where I was like, hey, women, live like you're supposed to. And that's going to inform your marriage. And you as a couple then need to figure out how that, if you're able, if you have the kind of marriage that's healthy enough that you two can sit down and work through those aspects of it. How do you live like this? Then that'll be a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
like I was saying, you spent most of your sermon and most of Colossians talks about like, okay, here's what it means to be fitting to the Lord or whatever,
Mhm.
submit to the Lord. But then we get to verse 18.
yes.
And wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Why do you think, this is for both of you, why do you think he started there? What, like, of all the roles he could have started with husbands, he could have started with a number of different people. Why do you think he chose Paul in terms of like world behind the text? Like why start with wives?
Mhm.
Well, and I'm wondering, I don't know that I have the answer to that. Barry, you might, but in Ephesians, the passage that you preached on, he
Mhm.
didn't start with wives. Didn't he start with husbands in that one?
No, he starts with wives.
Oh, he does?
He does.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, because it was now I remember because you said it was like coming off of like, of course you're going to submit to your
Yeah,
husbands.
Right.
So is that kind of the same concept in Colossians?
Yeah, I think if you look at the world behind the text of Ephesians, Colossians, and First Timothy, all the passages that Paul is addressing women in ways that make us really uncomfortable today, they're all taking place in the Roman province of Asia, the Western Anatolia, Western Turkey today. And I'm undoubtedly some of the same cultural dynamics were at play, where women were perhaps through the church being given a kind of freedom. I mean, even in this passage, he says, it doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, blah, blah, blah. Christ is all that matters. That there was this sense of, oh, the old patterns don't apply to
Mhm.
me. And so I'm sure even in small town Colossae, all the way up to massive metropolis Ephesus, like the same types of things were happening where women were perhaps taking advantage of that newfound freedom in a way that actually put them in harm's way.
Right.
And so my opinion, and there are plenty of people disagree with me, but my opinion on the Ephesians passage, and I would say, yeah, the same one here, Colossians 3, is Paul's essentially saying, look, this is just how it is. And you need to submit to your husband because in our culture, in our world, he's the one who's going to look after you. And it's his job to look after you because that's
Right.
how it worked in the first century.
Yeah, it's kind of understood. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, this is the distance, the cultural distance is so massive here. In verse 19, he says, husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, you should love your wife because marriage is built on love.
Mhm.
No, false. Back then, marriage was built on convenience, moving up in the world, marrying someone that's going to get your status up a little higher. Love was like, you're lucky if that developed on its own. Arranged marriage is
Right.
like, it was.
Yeah.
And so love your wife is already, again,
Controversial.
wives submit to
Yeah.
your husbands as is fitting for those who belong to the Lord. Okay, this is the way you're supposed to be. Husbands, love your wives.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Husbands, never treat them harshly,
Yeah.
but that's my right. But that's
Yeah.
my,
Right.
again, if we think in the first century context, it hits different
Mhm.
depending
Yeah.
on how you're reading this. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, I like how these sermons have a target audience, in this case, wives, but this is very much, your sermon is very much for husbands too. Like it, when you started using words like mutual submission, like to talk about marriage. So I was wondering, like, what does mutual submission look like in today's modern context when things like power dynamics can get way out of whack?
Yeah.
What does mutual submission actually look like? And have you guys, how does this play out for you guys in terms of mutual submission?
In our marriages or just
Yeah. Or have you seen it play out in Christian marriages or your own marriage? Yeah.
well, mutual submission to me is you are putting the other above yourself and you want the best for them. You like if my vantage point for my marriage with Jeff is that I want the best for him and I'm going to put his needs above my own, and like I don't think that happens a lot in marriages of any kind, even Christian marriages. I just don't think
Right.
it does. That's just that in any relationship, that's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing. Like to put someone else's needs and to be the recipient of that. Like
Mhm.
when Jeff does things where I know he's doing it just because he knows it's good for me or it will brighten my day or whatever, when it's a pain for him to do, like there's nothing better than having that kind of partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just lost a real pillar of our community, Rick Meyer,
Oh,
who's Pastor Marcus's father-in-law. And I just before this podcast met with the family and was hearing some stories and talked to, his widow and just got to hear a bit of his story. And that was a man who submitted himself to his family. Rick was constantly looking out for their best interest. He adored his wife. But one of the things that really stuck out to me is they were sharing his experience of coming to the Lord at age 42, his story. And I'm sure it's okay. I'm sure they wouldn't mind me sharing it because he wanted other people to hear this story. But that he was 42. They kind of were involved at church. They were kind of, I don't know, nominal Christians. He volunteered occasionally with like the kids ministry and things like that, but was kind of starting to drift, was starting to choose work over church more and more. And Debbie, his wife, basically said at one point, she wrote him a letter and she said, I really want you to prioritize your faith and church because it's for me and for the kids. Now, just imagine for a second what the average husband would do in that situation. What we hear stories all the time, especially as pastors, of, I'll just say this. There are a lot of husbands that would say, you don't understand. My
Mhm.
job is so important. I'm putting food on the table. Like I'm the one providing. I have to work.
Yeah.
Like it's nice that you're involved at church. I've got work to do. But that's not what Rick did. Rick got that note and immediately took it to heart. And he went and signed up for the next men's event thing.
Mm.
And it was at that moment that he met Christ and surrendered his life. And from that point on was a dedicated man of the Lord. And at 42 years old, he made that decision, but he made that decision because he was willing to submit himself to what his wife was saying, which is you need to take this seriously. And he did. So that to me is like an example of when it looks the way it should, where the husband is choosing to willingly submit himself for the sake of the needs of his wife.
And I also believe that Debbie in that moment was doing what was best for Rick by asking
Yes.
him to prioritize. It wasn't because she was, women get accused of being naggy all the
Right.
time, especially about the church thing. More women go to church first and end up dragging their husbands, so to speak, with them. But her asking him to do that was not a selfish ask. It was for the good of the family and for the good of Rick.
Yeah.
And his life changed and was so much better for it. Another example for me will always be, and I didn't go into this yesterday because I wasn't talking about marriage as a whole. I was talking more to wives, but my dad completely at the end of my mom's life submitted to her needs. I mean, there was no he moved into assisted living when he didn't need to because that's where she needed to be, and he wanted to be there to take care of her and make sure that she was okay. And so the whole last 10 years of my life, of his life, my dad completely submitted his will and his life to the care of my mother. And that was self-sacrificing. He ended up getting COVID in assisted living and in passing on. So, that was a prime example for me of loving someone more than you love yourself, for sure.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody recently. They don't even, I don't even think they go to church anywhere, but they kind of said, we were talking about this and the idea of submission. And there were two things they said that I found myself in like deeper discussion with them. One was they said that they thought that the concept of submission was outdated because nothing worth fighting for in this case we were talking about like women and women's rights and things like that was ever won through submission. And so I think there's a perception of, and the other thing they said was like the word submission means somebody has to be in charge. So wives submit to your husbands implies that the husband's in charge. And if we're mutually doing that, who's in charge? Like who gets to, implying that somebody had to be in charge. And so I found myself disagreeing with them, but I'm curious what your guys' response to something like that or that perception, that opinion would be.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with the meaning of the word submit. And I think it depends on your frame of reference or the way that you think about the meaning of that word to decide whether or not it feels like implicitly demeaning or like the concept of, I don't know, I'll be ridiculous. Like, let's imagine that we live in like some kingdom and like there's this king that's a tyrant and is constantly like taking advantage of everybody. Submitting in that context, it is that sense of like, I am willingly letting someone else take advantage of me and they're going to be the ones. But in that same, if the roles were changed and that king was benevolent and good and was looking out for the benefit of his kingdom, submitting to that kind of a king is saying, I'm going to work for the benefit of this kingdom. I'm going to follow the laws of a good leader. That's like a very different sensation than saying that I'm just going to be a doormat that gets walked all over. So now that's obviously like a king and a kingdom, but like the idea of people, and we could say queen or
Right.
queendom.
Yeah, sure.
Queen
That
of a,
should be a new word, queendom.
what would it be? Anyway, but I think in a marriage, what to me maybe a better phrase instead of the word submit to help with all the baggage that word has is just to say the word give way. Like, wives, give way to your husband. Husbands, give way to your wives. In other words, like set your needs and desires below the needs and desires of the other. And that does not have to feel like a outdated,
Like you're
domineering,
losing.
like
Yeah.
you're
Right.
losing or anything. And so when you said nothing good has ever happened through submission or whatever, I immediately went to things like I'm getting ready for the Loving Your Enemies series. And so I was thinking of Martin Luther King Jr. and the nonviolent resistance where they willingly submitted or maybe gave way to unjust laws and unjust, law enforcement officers so that they could bring like the injustice to the light. And I don't think anyone would say that form of submission was wrong. He actually changed the world and brought about a new level of racial equity and justice that we had not experienced as a country until that point. So it's like, I don't know. It all depends on what you mean when you say submit.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of my bottom line.
And I think if you're both coming and practically, if you're both coming to each other and to your family wanting the greater good, you both want what's good for each other, for your family, then practically you figure out ways where, again, like Jeff is better at certain things. So I'm going to give way to him in certain areas of our marriage because he just knows more about that topic, or I mean, honestly, in the whole area of money, I'm probably going to give way to Jeff because I don't he works in that industry.
Yeah.
Like, he understands estate planning and stuff. I don't understand it. I don't want it. I mean, we went to a meeting with somebody to talk about. I was on my phone and I was like, okay, so can someone just give me the bottom line?
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
Like,
Spell
can
it
you
out for me.
bottom line it for
Yeah.
me? And then there's ways that Jeff would say, well, Amy's really good at this, so I'm going to give way to her
Yeah.
on this. Sometimes people have asked me, does it bother you does it bother him that you're in front all the time, that you like, and I was like, absolutely not. He would never want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
that's not who he is. So he's fine to give way to me leading and being up front. He's proud of me. Like,
Yeah.
that's just as I'm proud of him in the things that give him life. And, yeah. So I think that's just practically part of it too.
Mhm.
But I also think it plays out in small ways. It's a posture thing. Am I willing to listen to the things that my wife is saying? By the way, today is our 7th anniversary. So if you
Oh,
guys need
happy
if you
anniversary.
need any advice,
Yep.
we're
Ooh.
nice. But like I'm learning, and I think Liv and I are both learning together, that there's sort of this dance of constantly giving way and recognizing that assuming positive intent, assuming the other person is looking out for your best and listening to them. Like I'll give you a recent example. I was really sick a week ago. Like, I was just on my back, massive cold. It was not COVID, but man, it put me on my back for 3 days. Anyway, super, super sick. And Liv would consistently say, you need to rest. You need to stop working. You need to just chill out because you're sick. And I would stubbornly want to go to work or try to figure out how I could get some more work done. She's like, you're sick. Don't do it, whatever. And my gut reaction said, you're wrong. I can power through this.
Yeah.
I could do, but as time went on and I began to say, hold on, let me just listen to what she had to say. Let me actually like pay attention to my body and say, and she was totally right. I needed to rest. And I tried to get back to work, and guess what? My recovery took longer because I was, you guys were part of a meeting where I was hacking my way through a meeting.
It was a lot. No,
I
I'm
know
just
it was
kidding.
rough, but like, I am learning that in those circumstances, my gut may say like, what do you know? She actually knew me better than I did in that moment. And giving way and listening to her and actually resting for another day was the wise thing to do. And so that's, I think, what wisdom looks like in a marriage is you learn how to give way and respect the opinions of the other. And they're not always right,
No.
but if you are consistently giving way to one another, you're going to get more and more aligned with what you actually need because they're looking at you from an outside
Right.
perspective. So
And if you it's like mutual trust too.
Yeah.
I trust
Yeah,
that
that's an important part.
have my best interest at heart. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a big piece of it. And it's not that you don't have a voice. You have a voice. How are you going to use that voice? Like,
Mhm.
what's the best way in this scenario? And that's why submission to the Holy Spirit is incredibly important, because you are aware of the work in your life and trying to make sure that you're choosing the right time and the right way of saying this. And I don't think we can do that on our own. I think we need help.
yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second. So submission to the Holy Spirit, or dependence on the Holy Spirit, is critical because we're created to be image bearers of Christ. And so do you think it's possible for Christians to have healthy marriages without being wholly dependent or submitting fully to the Holy Spirit?
I think every now and then, with the roll of the cosmic dice, a couple will get together that happen to be very, very compatible in their personalities, in their skill sets, and it can kind of just happen. But that's really, really rare. Most of the time, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, marriages require a significant level of self-sacrifice, attention, humility, willingness to grow, willingness to listen. And I just don't think that most people have it in them by default. Like, they're not born with that kind
Yeah.
of capacity. It requires a level of transformation from the Spirit. And that only comes when we submit ourselves to the Spirit and admit that we're not wise enough, strong enough, smart enough to get through this life alone. So so to me, unless you're one of those very, very rare
Yeah.
roll the dice people that could maybe figure out some of this stuff just because of the default settings of your life, you're probably going to need the Spirit in a
Yeah.
significant way.
So I guess my next question would be, what's the difference between like being submitted to the Holy Spirit and just like behavior modification? So like I go to therapy, they're trying to fix whatever issues I have, with the end result of trying to be better behaved in these instances or having whatever my problems are. I'm changing my behaviors to better manage these things in my life. I think there is a difference between behavior modification and submission to the Holy Spirit, but I think it's also easy to get confused, or not confused, but it's easy to get the two kind of mixed up, where it's like, say somebody was in the auditorium yesterday listening to this and be like, okay, I just need to change this, and then I'll be submitted to the Holy Spirit. Like, what's the difference? How does somebody know I am submitted to the Holy Spirit versus I'm just going to change these behaviors to be a better husband or wife? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. Well, I think behavior modification outside of like attention to what the Holy Spirit's saying probably won't last very long.
Right.
And it is, I mean, I wasn't joking around when I was talking about my sabbatical and spending just literally 15 to 20 minutes in the morning just in his presence, and I felt like my attention was more, I was more alert to the things of the Spirit and when I was being nudged to do something or not do something. And I think the behavior modification probably needs to come out of that kind of mindset.
Yeah.
Like, I get behavior modification. It's not like that's the wrong thing to do, but I think doing it outside of listening and being attentive to the Spirit is probably not going to.
So it should be like a byproduct of the other thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
It's
that would be
also-
my take.
Yeah. It's also, in general, behavior modification falls in the realm of like things that we can control and things that we can make decisions about and tackle with our own willpower or whatever. Often, in my experience, the call of the Spirit is sometimes to things that are beyond our control, or it's to do things that genuinely take you out beyond yourself, beyond your own capacity. And so, yeah, I think the difference is, like, if we're truly submitted to the Spirit might take us to places that we would never have gotten to on our own. We would never even think to go to these places deeper in our soul.
Yeah.
Because we'd be looking at fixing the problems,
Right.
XYZ. And then sometimes that can happen through counseling, where you think you're going in to fix X problem and you come out realizing that you've a deep brokenness about something else that's actually a far deeper root of that problem. And unless you had the help, you would never get there. And I think the same thing happens with the Spirit. The Spirit can unveil parts of our heart and parts of our brokenness that we're sometimes even resistant to admit that we are dealing with.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You have to have that posture of submission.
What about people that are like, maybe somebody heard this message yesterday, like, all right, I sincerely want to submit myself into being transformed through the Spirit. And say they get, 6 months, a year down the road, and it's like, I've sincerely tried to submit myself, but there's no change in my marriage. There's no change in this toxic relationship that I have. Like, what? I don't want people to leave this series being like, here's the silver bullet answer to how my relationships will get fixed.
Right.
So what would we say to somebody who maybe they've tried in the past to be like, we're going to be more godly in our marriage. We're going to try to do these things as spiritual nature, the two of us, or to try to help and heal our marriage. But we've been down this road and it's just not working. Like, what do we say to people like that?
Well, unfortunately, it takes two to tango.
Right.
It takes both marriage partners making a commitment to work on themselves and to submit mutually for this to really, really work. And so I believe that there will likely be positive outcomes when one when one member of a couple takes this seriously and is really working on this, I think it, it's more likely than not that the spouse will respond positively to the fact that that something has changed and may feel even convicted to be more self-giving on their own. But the reality is that you can't. Everybody's a moral free agent. You can't control another person, and so there are times where marriages, just if both couples are not, or both spouses are not willing to work on it, that I don't know how you can fix that.
Yeah.
It's not a quick fix.
Preaching on this was really hard
Yeah.
because I know a lot of women that are in that scenario, and they've worked and they've done it over and over and over, and it's still back to the same spot. And they are some of the most long-suffering people I've ever met, because it's better for a while and then we're right back to square
Right.
one.
Yeah.
And so what I will say is that they are better women today than they were 10 years ago, because of the work that they've done on themselves, and the therapy that they've been in, and the submission to the Holy Spirit that they have lived out. So they are better people for it. But I can't say their marriages are better,
Mhm.
because their partner is good for a bit, and then we go back to square one, and that's
Yeah.
really hard. So
Yeah, that's kind of why I asked the question, because I knew that you had ties to people who, and you brought it up. I mean, in your sermon, you said, "I know that this is hard," and you went through
yeah,
addressing some of the hard parts of being in marriages. And actually, one of the you said we are to reflect God's character and likeness in our relationships, and one of the traits that you listed was forgiveness. And you said this is actually one of the hardest things, because I guess the question is, how does forgiveness apply when somebody has experienced like deep betrayal or abuse? And you said don't submit to an abuser. So what should they be taking away from this?
I, that's the hardest piece of the puzzle. I don't know. I don't know what, because I certainly don't want to advocate for people splitting up. I don't want, that's not, but it's really hard when you're talking about a woman that, I mean, abuse is a whole other level, depending on any kind of abuse, emotional, physical.
Yeah.
It's I don't know what, and that's why I said at the end, and I already had somebody email me about meeting with Lori Hartman. A couple wants
Oh,
to meet
good.
with her and talk to her.
Good.
You got to seek help. I
Yeah.
mean, like
Yes.
you either individually, you've got to go talk to somebody. You find a pastor, come talk to us. If your partner's unwilling to come with you, then come on your own. Like, let us help you sort through, where you go from here, what your next steps are. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think every marriage is obviously different. Everybody's challenges and issues are different. It's just, this is one of those things that people who do kind of deconstruct and do walk away from the church, they potentially point back to and said, I met with so and so from a church and they told me to stay in this relationship and submit to my husband, and I was being abused or betrayed or whatever.
Yeah.
And because it was biblical to do this, that they've then perpetuated the abuse. And so it is super challenging because everybody's different. I just think that we have to kind of be willing to have the conversations with people that we trust, with people that we love, to try to sort this out, because it can be pretty harmful for people who are experiencing these things, to just kind of be left to their own devices, I guess.
Yeah, and it's such a mess, because we live at a time when marriage as a concept has been so altered from, I think, what Scripture is calling us to represent. We have people who their mindset of marriage is, well, we'll stay married as long as we love each other, and as long as that love stays, exciting, then we'll stay married. But then the moment that they encounter hardship, all of a sudden it's like, man, I don't think I want to stick with this, because I don't want to keep doing the hard work. We have people who, they're really not as excited about marriage as they are about the wedding and the wedding and
For
the
sure.
excitement and the passion of that takes center stage, and then all of a sudden they have to learn how to be a roommate with this person, and
Right.
and then it goes off a cliff. So part of the problem is just that we have completely lost the thread of what marriage is meant to be, in my opinion. So that's a part of it. But the reality is, there's a lot of people who are in marriages that maybe they did have the right mindset going into it, but now they're feeling adrift or lost, and they don't know how to go forward. And the difficult reality is that, in my opinion, the only path forward to finding healing in marriage is for both partners to have a commitment to work on it, to submit themselves to what God would have to say in the marriage, to be willing to admit that they're wrong on some things, and that often does require external help. Again, it's not the kind of thing that you can just kind of like will yourself into. It's behavior modification just doesn't work.
Right.
It requires something deeper.
So what is the church's role in helping here? When I say the church, I mean us as like pastors and participants and staff and things like that, ministries, but I also mean like the church, the people of the church. What is our responsibility if we elevate marriage to such a status that like it's sacred and there's thoughts that God has about this relationship and this covenant? What is the church's relationship, or what is the church's responsibility to kind of help people in their marriages?
I mean, I think talking about it and making people know that we're aware that there's a lot out there. I think being available to people. I'm sure there's probably more if we had the capacity, more things that we could do. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know, because it's such an individual. Like, sure, we could have a marriage conference. We could talk about these things at length and over a longer period of time, and that might be helpful for some people. But it is such an individual and couples based. Like, what one couple needs is not necessarily what another couple needs. So I do think there's a lot of individual help that needs to be available to people.
Yeah, my opinion is that the very best thing we could do as a church body to help the marriages in our midst is discipleship. And that means taking another person under your wing, someone who's not as far maybe down the road of walking with Jesus, and walking through life with them, not just marriage, like life.
Yeah.
And so honestly, and I'll just speak because I preached about husbands, like the best thing we could do for the husbands at Grace is to have all the older men of grace taking younger men of grace under their wing, and discipling them and walking with them as they walk with Jesus.
Right.
And the same thing is true for the women, because if our people are discipled, if they are on a journey with Jesus, if they have older people speaking into their life and viewing them from an outside perspective, and they can know their life, know their marriage, like that's when we have that intergenerational community that can help people get. Hey, I noticed you kind of snapped at your wife the other day. You want to talk about that? Because that seemed really harsh. Let's talk about it. Like that's many months or years ahead of. So you're ready to divorce. Like it's like if you could start talking then, it's people that you trust. So that to me, that
until it gets before it gets to the place where it's
like the
so
walking,
fractured.
it's walking through life with another person. And that's so difficult right now because we are all so extremely isolated, and we are living at the bleeding edge of individualism. We are all very much alone. So I'm not saying that this is like an easy thing. I don't have like a ready-made solution for how we can all get into discipleship relationships. That's kind of our overarching task as pastors, trying to figure out how do we offer this at Grace. But to me, that's the answer. That's what it boils down to for both men and women.
And if one-on-one relationship is weird, it feels scary for you, to ask three guys, like, or three women to go through this with you. Like, I don't know that there's a magic way of doing it, but that's, and then you have someone in your life that you are accountable to. So when you see the things, you point them out and say, hey, that's not good.
And honestly, if you're a younger couple and you're willing to work on this a little bit, like look for the older couple in your midst that's been married for a gazillion years that you really respect, and they just like, they still seem in love somehow, and go and ask them if you can buy them dinner. You as a couple, take them out to dinner and just pick their brain. Start there. Like take some initiative if you're desiring to have those older people speaking into your life. That's where it starts, because they may not even know that that's what you're looking for until you ask.
And start working on it when it's healthy.
Yeah.
Like, don't
100%.
wait till it's, I mean, like, care about it because when
Yeah.
it's going well, it's easy to be like, this is great. And
Right.
we like each other and no, that's when you do some work
That's right.
because you're working for what's to come because it is good. It is going to get harder.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you add, if you do choose to have children, and you can, that adds a whole other level of
right.
stress. And so you want to work on it while it's good.
That's right.
Yeah.
And marriage counseling, in my opinion, should not just be for people in crisis.
No.
It's like getting an oil change on your car, and you do that regularly because you don't want to have a $2,000
Right.
blow up on your car. So you do the maintenance, and that can look like taking care of your marriage by getting counseling or having other people speaking into your
Right.
life. Yeah, do it when it's healthy. I agree.
I think it's important to, if you're a part of the church, you're a believer, I think it's important to break down whatever wall is keeping you from being vulnerable with other people. Because from what I've experienced in talking with other people who are going through marital issues or whatever, the common thing that I see is like there's a shame to what they're going through, and they tend to want to like keep it really like, we can solve this. Let's just like push through. We'll get it, like solve it. We'll go to counseling or whatever. And the catch in my spirit there is like, you should have people in your life that like want to walk with you through this. And if you don't, like, are you willing to be vulnerable with one other person?
Right.
And just say, I feel like my marriage is falling apart. Can we talk about that? I remember I wasn't married at the time, but I remember, I don't remember what I was going through, but I asked a guy, it wasn't about marriage, but I was like, man, I just feel distant from God. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about things right now. And I was trying to be a little vulnerable with him, but his question back at me was like, well, how much time are you spending with him? Or how much like have you been doing XYZ to like connect with God? And the answer was 0. And so it wasn't that his answer like solved all my problems, but it was kind of like me being willing to be vulnerable, and like, I'm not doing as good of a job as I kind of project to the world that I'm doing.
Sure.
And so can you listen to me?
Yeah.
And so I think willing to be vulnerable with your church community or just one other person is important too.
I think we're getting to a place finally in culture, and hopefully it's bleeding over into the church where people aren't as scared to this next generation. My kids' generation is not as scared to talk about, you know, emotional, mental illness, like
Right.
things that are, and I think that will spill over even into marriages. We don't have to pretend like we've got it all together because everybody knows nobody has it all together anymore.
Yeah.
And so I do think people in the past, and probably my generation for sure, have been like, we've got to at least appear that things are good.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and if they're not, we're not going to tell anyone. But I think that that's getting kind of ripped away now. And I
Mhm.
think people are more willing to say it's not okay. And if some of us that were older would just admit that it's not easy and it's not okay and it's not perfect, maybe some of the younger generations would be like, ugh, okay, good. They don't have it all together.
Sure.
Yeah.
The flip side of that, though, and I agree with you, Amy. The flip side, though, is the younger generation is also far more okay with just staying stuck in the mental unhealth.
that's
and
true.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, this is just how it is. Of course I have
Right,
anxiety. Of course I have
right.
this. So this is why both generations need each other, because the older generation, can hear this younger generation. It's so willing to talk about their unhealth, and then be able to say, thank you for being so vulnerable. You shouldn't stay there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and to have an older
Mhm.
person that can take you under their wing and say, hey, you don't have to stay stuck here, and I want to help walk with you. Like that's why we need each other. And I think that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. I have other questions about like, how do these types of messages, how should these impact people who are single parents or have gone through divorce or whatever? Like, how do these types of messages apply? And I think that's a good segue to be like, where do we go next? Because I know
Sure.
that that's kind of what we're going to touch on.
Yeah. The final topic for our series this next weekend is singles. And it wasn't some sort of intentional code to put singles last. I promise. It just worked out that way. But I'm going to be talking through 1 Corinthians 7, all about what Paul has to say about the gift that singleness can be to the church. And I hope it's an encouragement to people who are single or single again, that they're role is a significant one, and that we have a lot to gain from their presence, and it hopefully will also be a call to the church to not continue the cultural pattern of making everything about marriage and kids.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Okay.
that's where we're headed.
All right. And then starting in June, we're going to be talking about
Loving your
loving our
enemies.
enemies, which
I'm pumped for that.
isn't a problem here.
Nope.
Nope, not here.
Not here.
We've
All right.
covered it.
So Amy, thank you for the sermon. Thanks for coming in. I know you're not feeling super great today, but
It's okay. This
at
was
least you're hydrated and
I know. Sorry, I have to. My throat is so dry. I have
It's
to keep
okay.
drinking water. Yeah, Jeff he practiced self-sacrifice and love because I snored real bad because I don't feel good. So he shoved me a few times and
he did.
Yeah, he said, "Did
I'm
you
a sweaty
remember?"
mess.
We won't even talk about that. But he said, "Did you know I shoved you like 3 or 4 times last night?" And I said, "I remember one time, but I did not remember the other one." So
TMI.
yeah, sorry about that. You
Yeah.
can cut it. You
It's
can
all
cut it out.
Um,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Marin should be back next week.
Yep.
So yeah, Barry, can you send us out?
I sure
Oh,
can.
yeah.
Okay.
Amy probably could, but do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God.
And we'll see you on the other side of Sunday.